banks.
I'm not at all disputing, and no one from my side of economics would dispute that letting the banks go under at that time 5 years ago would not have created a hell of a lot of pain. What I'm saying is it would have been done and gone with a couple of years later. We would then have set ourselves up for a generation of growth. Instead, by bailing them out and continuing to bail them out with taxpayers' money, with the next generation's money, and maybe even my grandchildren's money, we remain in low growth at best. And I would suggest we're actually in a generational depression.
Do you see the economy more rosier than Jonathan does?
I do.
Why?
Luckily, otherwise we might as well all go off and split our wrists.
But why do you? Why do you?
I mean, I think that there's various limiting factors to the sort of apocalypse scenario that you've got there, and I know that we have historical examples we can draw upon and say, well, perhaps it's like the Japan in the 1980s, perhaps it's like the Great Depression. But I think that we could quite likely see that it isn't like those things, and that it was a shock, and it is not necessarily going to have 30, 50, 60-year even 20-year consequences. The fact that America has already had growth and pulled itself out is a very positive thing. The way that I see it is that the problem is not that there are insufficient, that there are too many fetters on capitalism. The problem is that there are still insufficient fetters upon capitalism.
Two quick questions to you, because I then want to move on. Jonathan, if there are, as we're reporting in the papers, sometimes 7, 8, 9, 10 people applying for each house that's on the market, with people having sealed bids and getting very excited, well, then how on earth will prices ever fall? That's not going to happen in a city like London.
Well, in March of this year, the budget was a buying votes budget, as all politicians do. He brought out Help to Buy, which was a shock to the system. It brought buyers in left, right and centre. I've got to pay for it. My children are going to be paying for it when they're older in about 25 years' time. To answer your question, internally within the UK, probably nothing is going to stop that. But I reiterate what I said. It seems very likely that 5 years after the global economic shock, there's going to be another one within the next 2 or 3 years.
And Tess, if it isn't an apocalypse on the way, if we've got house prices at 10, 11 times income, that the recovery is allegedly funded by people borrowing, the amount of money in the shops is now being borrowed, it's not real. How on earth will that house of cards not come crumbling down?
The point about house prices being so much of a multiplication of wages and comparing that historically, it ignores the massive fact of interest rates being so low. That's why it's possible to have house prices where they are.
But they can only go one way, presumably, interest rates.
That's right. And there is a big question. Jonathan's absolutely right. There is a big question around what happens when interest rates go up. And essentially...
Is there more than one option when they go up? What would the other option be?
How do you mean?
Well, if one option is that everything comes crumbling down, what's the other option?
Yeah, no, exactly. So Jonathan has a scenario that when interest rates go up and everything falls apart. I think there is certainly another really quite likely option, which is what I think is hopefully and likely to happen, which is that at some point interest rates start to creep up. But they do so when the economy has picked up, such that people can begin to take in that slack.
Well, let's hope that whichever one of you is right, we survive whatever is heading our way. Can we talk about some very serious issues now? Tess, Cameron's selfie.
Yes,
now,
absolutely.
This was, of course, at a day of memories for the people who adore and wanted to celebrate the life of Nelson Mandela.
Absolutely. Wonderful occasion. Barack Obama gave an absolutely sensational speech, I thought. But it was not a sombre occasion. I think that's plain to anybody who saw even a glimpse of it. It was a joyous, jubilant occasion during which the Danish Prime Minister fancied a snap of herself and Obama. It looks to
Relation
me...
of Neil Kinnock, which I didn't know.
Absolutely right.
Last
That's
week.
right. Yeah, exactly. Daughter-in-law of Neil Kinnock. Looks to me very much like David Cameron photo-bombed, as it were, from the side. And I think that the one photo that somebody snapped, it really does look like she's trying to angle the camera away from David Cameron and towards herself.
Just want it with me,
Obama.
me and Barack. That's the kind of picture that I've taken. I just get everyone else there. I just want me and them, whoever them may happens to be. You always kind of Photoshop it out.
Exactly.
There have been people criticising his decision to take part in that selfie.
Yeah. You see,
By the look on her face, by the way, Michelle Obama was possibly the most critical. But
yes.
were people right to criticise him?
Well, I think it's like this. I mean, in this age when we can all photograph each other, all video each other, all of the time, we've got to a little bit, I think, get over it on the one hand, and we've got to say that was an instant, that was 1 second, and Michelle Obama looked cross for a 1 second. Can we not go too crazy about this? Can we not splash it all over the newspapers and make a massive big deal of it? On the other hand, I do think also people need to be careful what they're doing with their mobile phone, and if you wouldn't put it on, Facebook as your status update, woohoo, here's me and Barack at Nelson's memorial service, then, perhaps you shouldn't be involved in it.
Yes, and the irony, of course, of that picture, I think we mentioned last night, how many other people were taking a picture of that very same shot. We saw it in the papers.
Yeah.
There was no need for the selfie. Jonathan, what did you make of that day of memorial for Nelson Mandela?
I thought it was an opportunity for politicians and others to push their brand at the memorial of a great man. I thought it was pretty sickening, I have to say. People
on his coattails. Should David Cameron have taken a selfie? Does it matter? Because it was, as Tess says, it was a celebratory day. Today was a far more respectful day, and the tone was completely different. That was a different day.
I think Tess is right. It was a jubilant event, and so what? Obama, the Danish woman, and Cameron were having a giggle, having a laugh. Why not?
All right. Keep your calls and thoughts coming, and we'll go to many of those after midnight tonight. This is Mark, who says, I don't care what my veg looks like. No waste in my house. And would you believe, over the past year, I've collected so much tin food and dried stuff. I donated 3 shopping bags to a food bank bag collection this week. Says Mark. Oh, yes, I did. Thank you. Mark sent me a Christmas card along with many others, and I did receive that today. In fact, it's on my desk outside. Thank you very much for that. Simon@bbc.co.uk. You can also email. That is the email. This is Pamela, who says 2 questions on the email. When banks are being fined by regulators for their failings, why is no one in jail? That's question 1. And is the problem low pay? Is the problem low-pay taxpayers through the welfare state usually bail? Oh, I see. Yeah, that if you're being paid low pay, then the welfare state is bailing out employees.
Employers, yeah, exactly. Well, the Lloyd's situation, I mean, it's crazy. Is there a year in the last 10 years when Lloyd's hasn't been mis-selling? I knew a banks analyst whose job was to check what was going on in Lloyd's accounts, and in the year something like 2007 or 8, I think it was, they had what they called a non-recurring charge in their accounts. That was for compensating people on mis-selling. And the one thing you could say about that charge is that it recurred every single year. It's pretty much, is there honey still for tea? Is Lloyd still mis-selling? Yes. It's bonkers.
Why is no one in jail?
Well, that is the question of the moment. I think it's the one of the biggest travesties in the modern world that why I have to ask this question: why is the national broadcaster not on that question every single day of the week? Every other week for the past 5 or 7 years, we have heard of banks around the world, particularly in the UK and in the US, not just doing mis-selling antics, but actual fraud, actual criminality, manipulating the London interbank offer rate LIBOR, money laundering billions for drug barons in Central America, and you know what?
And you try opening an account without your passport.
Yeah.
You try going there with a change of address.
My point is, you're absolutely correct. My point is, time after time, banks, when they're found out, they pay fines, as the caller said or the emailer said. Not a single prosecution. What is going on in our justice system?
All right, and we will debate that, of course. Can we move on? In fact, indeed, this is from Brian in Detroit. He says, "I thought that the shot of the PM and the President was great. I was shocked, however, that they didn't have a beer and a joint in their hands." In fact, talking of that, can we talk, Jonathan, about Uruguay and this idea that cannabis should be made and indeed possession and growth of cannabis is legal, the sale of cannabis. They want the rest of the world to join in.
I think this is a truly great story. I must make the statement, I have never puffed even a tobacco cigarette in my life. However,
because you don't want to pay the taxes on it, I would imagine.
I don't want to get all the ailments, etc., that come from it. But marijuana, the war on drugs, we've failed. We failed war on terrorism. We've also failed in the war on drugs. No one can convince me that marijuana is as problematic as the hard drugs, the heroines and the cracks and whatever. Marijuana is recreational, and indeed it even has some benefits health-wise. So I read, so I hear in news reports. And I think if we were to legalise marijuana, you'd have... first of all, huge taxes coming into the system. You'd have a massive reduction in the cost of the war on drugs. And then, the authorities can focus on the hard drugs and the pushers.
Does it, though, send a message out that cannabis is okay? I mean, we all know that
Why is it not okay?
Well, because it causes lung cancer and it causes tuberculosis. Yeah. It can also cause memory loss and brain malfunction. Yeah,
two points to that. I read a report today, in fact, because of the Uruguay story, that actually there's not even a 1% chance of getting lung cancer from marijuana. That's the first point. Secondly,
but most people smoke marijuana with tobacco.
Well, I was going to say we have had forever legal tobacco, which kills how many tens of thousands?
But if it were illegal now, you wouldn't make it legal. That's my point.
But it is legal. Yeah. But it is legal. And secondly, we have legalised booze. I'd far rather, if I were a cop, I'd far rather be talking, as it were, on a Saturday night to someone who was doped up rather than out of their face on 10 pints of lager.
Tess? Talking of doped up and out of their face on 10 pints of lager.
Thank you. I try my best.
What do you make of this? Would it work? I mean, they want people to. They want the rest of the world to go along with this experience, to allow the adoption of this social and political experiment to face a serious problem, drug trafficking. Are we better off legal, or are we better off banned?
I think I agree with a lot with what Jonathan says, but it won't actually make that big a difference, because the main problem with drug trafficking and so forth isn't marijuana. So it isn't actually that big a deal, but it is probably a better idea than the current situation we have, which is just a bit silly and doesn't make any sense, whereby you've got something that is supposedly illegal, but it never gets prosecuted, because the only reason that you would prosecute it is if somebody's actually dealing in other stuff. So, it's a bit of an anachronistic law that we have. And so, you might as well sort it out. And I agree with you. I don't think that legalising marijuana it forms a pathway to more serious drugs. I don't think it does. Uruguay your way, I'll Uruguay my way. You can smoke ganja in Uruguay, but you can't be Uruguay by the banks of the Ganges. Is what something a friend said to me today.
This is I must meet some of your friends. This is Robin, who says marijuana is a pernicious drug. It's not the soft drug Jonathan is saying. Certainly not a skunk. And he says personally, I can't stand the smell of it, so I'm the wrong person to even comment on it. There are people who would genuinely be worried about anything that might encourage their children to take up cannabis, and surely to legalise it will say it's okay.
No doubt. That is always the case. Change is always difficult. But to suggest that certain types of marijuana is actively detrimental, I think is actually childish, and it's a pack of lies from various authorities who keep trotting this out time after time. There is evidence beyond doubt that marijuana has health benefits, and it is certainly not in any way antisocial.
All right. Just to end with, because we could go through that subject, I'm sure, for our week, can we end on what is, I think, a remarkably uplifting story, Tess? This is a story of the soldier with the bionic arm.
Yes, that's
and
right.
how it operates.
That's right. So here's a soldier who got very badly injured in Afghanistan called Andrew Garthwaite, and he was fitted a year ago, with a bionic arm, with a robotic arm. But the surgery that he's just undertaken, and he's the first person in the UK to have had this surgery, has enabled. They've basically shifted the nerve endings that existed in his shoulder, which he no longer had any function and control with, into his chest. And by doing so, he is able to manipulate the arm with purely the thoughts in his brain. And this is really a very exciting thing. It is highly remarkable. And what's going on here is a whole lot of developments in a lot of different parts of the world, which do lead one to the conclusion that looking at a lot of the stuff that we have in science fiction, you wonder, might it actually be getting closer to science fact? There are experiments in America of computer-to-brain interfacing, whereby people are hooking up to computers and then are moving things and putting things onto screens purely with their thoughts. And very recently there's been a brain-to-brain interface experiment whereby two people were in completely separate rooms, etc., connected their brain sensors to effectively to the internet, and then over the internet managed to get a thought transmission, if you like, to the other person who then pressed a stroke on a keyboard. Now, these are tiny.
I don't know what I'm more worried about, Jonathan's Armageddon or this to come through. Look, we're out of time, but it's a fascinating story. Before we finish, I do want to just give you both a chance to talk briefly about what you do, and if people want to find out more, because I think I'll tell our listeners from what they're saying, have found both of you fascinating tonight. In fact, Robin says, I've got to say, Jonathan is fascinating. He's not even worried. It's an exclamation mark. He's not saying I'm worried. He's just fascinating.
Well, I haven't done my job properly then.
They don't call in Jonathan Doom Davis for no reason. Jonathan, if people want to find out more about you, you're a wealth manager.
I am. Check me out on Twitter at JD Wealth Manager.
Is there any wealth to manage?
Well, that's the thing.
I think you have to bring your own wealth along. I think that's the way it works.
There will always be rich people, and they're getting richer.
Tess?
So you can check out my book, Look After the Pennies, for lots of money-saving tips and how to buy fruits in markets and other things you might not have thought of. And my next book will be coming out next year, The Secret Life of Money.
It's very disturbing that when you go to the supermarket, we're talking about back to where we came in. When you see I think you must all look at the discount aisle, do you? Is it just me? The shelves, the reduced.
I love Aldi. It's one of my favourite companies on the planet.
But have you noticed that the reductions when you go to the big supermarkets now are basically nothing? Was £3, now $2.95. You used to be able to get things for a song.
Yeah.
I've even seen in our local, I won't say which company it is, but buy two for X price, but if you bought them individually, you got them cheaper.
Brilliant.
The world has gone mad, and they will probably say that's a mistake, but we know it's not. It's called marketing, and we all fall for it. Jonathan Davis, Tess Reid, great hour. Thank you so much for joining us both on the programme tonight. Simon Lederman Show, BBC London 94.9. We'll take your calls after midnight. 0207 224 2000 is our number. You can email simon@bbc.co.uk and text 81333. Start your message with the word London. 1.5 minutes to midnight. Valley Fontaine has the headlines on the way next.